Hey, welcome to Loser LLM. Um, if this is the first video you're watching for AI, you are in the right place. My goal is with Loser LLM, which yes is self-deprecating, is to take a completely different tack than what you see with a majority of the content, at least that I've been exposed to on places like YouTube or Reddit. And my experience with it was that it was very in your face. Go, 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 live, 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 new tool, new tool, new tool. Just very overwhelming. And so my goal is to kind of create content or material that really, allows you to put blinders on, kind of slow things down a little bit, and go at your own pace, or at least at a pace that hopefully is comfortable for you. And so, why loser LLM? Because if everyone's a loser, no one is. So, all right, what I'm going to cover today in the introduction is Breathaware. So this is a device it's a wearable device that I invented. I got my provisional patent in June, and I'm going to show some pictures of the development of that, the physical hardware, and then we're going to look at how my journey has taken me to where I need to start creating the application that's pairs with it on a smart device, and how we're going to utilize AI to do that development work locally. And then I kind of walked through a little bit about my villain origin story, not truly villain, but just kind of what's leading to this and what's how I'm losing sight of the shore. And then we'll take a look at what our next steps are going to be, and that's going to be what we're calling the stack. So if you have a technology background, you're familiar with this word. If you're not, basically just anything that if you're working on a project and you have to involve multiple softwares, those softwares that are in your tool set are just called the stack. So we have two tools that we're going to use throughout the course of this entire channel, and maybe introduce some auxiliary things much further down the road. But with these two tools, we're going to break things down to a very elementary level that hopefully anyone can follow. And look, if you look at the channel, there's probably 10, 15 subscribers. If you're stumbling upon this for the first time and you have questions, you have my attention. Okay. I don't, I'm here to help. I want to help grow the field. I want to put the power in the user's hands, and I want them to be able to do things locally on their own devices. I mean, we all saw what happened to the internet when AWS had a disruption in their services. You know, majority or a large portion of the internet was unavailable. And so if you had local LLMs only, or if you used AI offline on your PC, those things can be avoided. So we'll get started here. So first, I want to talk a little bit about where I began. So at the beginning of this year, well, actually, it really begins about 3 years prior to the beginning of this year, on a where I had injured myself while doing squats at the gym. The worst pain I'd ever experienced in my life. That was 3 years ago. Well, it happened again in January. So January 7th, I will never forget that date. I was laying in bed, and like I said, I'd been dealing with some back pain, and for whatever reason, during this period of time in my life, it had been getting worse, right? And so I was laying there and I sneezed, right? Just like any other day. It's a Tuesday. I'm like, okay, I'm getting up. I got to get ready for work. Before I get up, I'm just laying there and I sneeze, right? And I just instantly have that worst pain I've ever felt in my life, nerve pain shooting down my back, or I don't even know, it's just like you are pain. The pain is so intense, like where it's coming from, but all you can think is pain. Like literally, just the word pain just repeats over and over in your head. It's so difficult to like. The pain is indescribable. It was pain. So what happened was I ended up going to the hospital and going to the ER actually, and I had because I went to the ER, they did imaging because they don't care about insurance, or the requirements of your insurance. They're just trying to solve the problem, and that was the issue the first time around. Is that they just gave me some exercises to do at home and called it good. So I got the imaging. You can see here, this is an MRI of my spine, and then you can see where I just copied the description from the doctor on my L5S1 nerve, which is where what you can see here, where there's that protrusion into my spinal canal, where the disc is kind of like, I don't know, it's deflated, I guess, and it's kind of pinched into my spinal canal, or my, my spinal cord here. So, uh, get into physical therapy, and I'd had this experience at work where there was a day where I was really struggling with my pain, right? I mean, and it's not even before I had sneezed, it wasn't like this constant pain where I was constantly in pain. It was like a dull pain where as soon as I got up, stepped out of bed, it just started, and it was like that until I laid down when I got home from work, which is what I was doing and was contributing to my situation. Wasn't good. So I while I was at work, I was really struggling to do something that was simple or should have been easy for me to do in Excel, and I could not, like, I just couldn't focus. Right, I had this nagging sensation in my side, like somebody that's like poking you, tapping you, like saying, "Hey, hey, hey, I'm over here. Come here," and trying to do something. You can't. It's so difficult. And so I went and talked to my boss, and I was like, "Hey, look, I'm really struggling. I can't even do this Excel formula. Like, I can't think through it." And he was like, "All right, Nick, first of all, I just want you to take a deep breath." So I was like, "All right." So I'm doing right now too. So I took a deep breath, and I felt legitimate relief from my pain. And it was fleeting, right? It wasn't permanent, but I knew that it did something, right? And so I was like, man, that really helped me. And I was kind of surprised that it did anything at all, because I thought it would help me calm me down, but really it helped. It was a wave of relief for the pain. And so I always kind of remembered that. And that was about a month before that January 7th date. So when January 7th happened, I was just like, man, I'm so grateful that I had that kind of conversation, because that really helped me be aware of that. And I was able to provide myself with, some temporary relief for the pain when I remembered to breathe deeply, right? Which wasn't all the time. And so I started to go down this path, and this kind of jumps right into it. But at the time where I worked, they had just introduced Google Gemini to Gmail, which is what we use. And so that was like the same week that this happened, or the week before. And so I ended up taking some time off for work. I was laying on my living room floor, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to dive into this whole AI thing. And so I signed up for the best subscription you could for ChatGTP. And then I was, utilizing Pro all the time. And one of the first things I really started to do with it was to kind of poke my head around and understand if there was a device that could help me remember to take a deep breath, right? Because whenever you are in pain and whenever you are experiencing anxiety, the first thing you think about is not, taking a deep breath, unless you're like conditioning, or you've already conditioned yourself to do so. So I was on the hunt for a device that I could wear that would monitor my breathing and basically detect when I wasn't breathing adequately, so that I could, because chances are when that was occurring, I was in my pain. And so in order to get relief, I needed that reminder to kind of pull me out of it. And so I looked and I looked, and I came across a couple of devices that seemed very, pretty specialized, and they were like that was geared towards athletes, and the price tag was pretty high. So it was like, I'm not, it wasn't for me. So so then I set myself down this path of, how do I invent something? How do I create something that can do this? And so I just kind of worked iteratively with ChatGTP, and I shared thoughts and ideas, and I was like, well, you know, here's what I'm thinking about. I wouldn't even ask a question. I would just, type it in and hit send, and then it would come back and have some suggestions for me, or some ideas to try. And so uh, I ended up actually getting a patent. So this was sometime in June. So these are like the forms that I was filling out, or the names of the forms. Obviously, it's just a screenshot. And uh, before I got to the invention and the patent that I got in June, obviously I had to go. I did a lot of prototyping, right? Just rapid prototyping by buying off the shelf parts at Walmart, Lowe's, anything I could order from Amazon, I did. And so that's what you see here. So typical, whenever I whenever somebody tells me, or if I think of somebody else and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm an inventor," I'm like, "Okay, yeah, this guy's a nut," which applies. But I I don't know. Like I'm self conscious about saying I'm an inventor. I am an inventor because I don't know, something about it just this is it's surreal to me. So anyway, you can see here where my final design basically is it's going to be a wearable that sits on your chest, kind of tucked in your holster. And the way it works is that there's a string wound around a reel, very similar to a tape measure. And when the reel rotates, a sensor reads that rotation and feeds it to a it'll be paired with an app on your phone that will get transformed into a waveform. It's just like you'd see your heart rate, you'll see your breath rate, right? So you'll see like an inhale. I'll start a little lower here. You'll see an inhale followed by an exhale, and then if you're breathing in shallow, it'll be a very faint line. And if you're breathing deeply, like the flow state is 6 breaths per minute. And you're going to see that there, right? And so the goal is to give visibility to everyone's waveform for their breath. In fact, I don't have my mission statement in front of me, but basically it's to transform breath work worldwide. I think worldwide is a pretty common way to end most mission statements for startups. So I'm right on cue, right on par. So here you can see, this is me at my desk. I've got everything set up. You can tell here where the camera, this is my camera, is pointing straight down, right? So I have a ton of content uh, throughout my maker journey. I called it. I saved it to a folder in my Google Drive like along the way so that I could remember all these things. And I think that it will give me a great opportunity to create additional videos in the future related to Breathaware. But that's not why we're here today. So well, one more quick shot here. So I ended up actually buying a 3D printer and doing a lot of my own prototype, like rapid prototyping on my own. I so I started out with it's like kind of a brick as a design, and then I transformed it to what you see here. So it's kind of foreign looking, but it has a very ergonomic fit to it. So when I did my prototyping, I started here and I just sort of iterated, right? So I have this strap that's for a heart rate monitor that I threaded through it, right? I created an insert or a cut through this device, and then I would wear it. I'd strap it on, and then I'd go walk around the block. I'd come back and I'd like just be thinking about if I was feeling any particular pressure points, and then I'd go look in the mirror and see if my skin had reddened, if there was uneven redness, right? Is the weight being distributed evenly, or the pressure from the strap, etc. And I got to this point here where I still remember this, and it was perfect. I went for a walk. I came home while I was wearing it, right? I came home, I sat down at my desk, and I'm sitting there and I'm like going back to work, and I'm like, gosh, where did I put that thing? And I'm like looking around my apartment, and then I was like, oh my God, I reached up to my chest and I felt it. And I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, I can't believe I forgot I was even wearing it, which is exactly what you want, right? You don't even want to realize that you're wearing it. But I'll tell you something, right? I think it's funny. So whenever I talk to like, there's a certain group of people, and it's not like you know, men aged 30 to 35, like, close to me, uh, think that they won't like it because they don't want to wear a strap. It'll make them uncomfortable. It's not like that. It's like a personality thing. But I've noticed, and this is what I think is going to happen. Okay, I keep looking at my screen, but the camera's over here. This is what I think is going to happen. I think that the first time somebody wears it, I think they'll be agitated, right? They'll be like, "Oh man, I hate, I don't like things touching me. It makes me uncomfortable. I'm like, it's just stressing me out. I'm getting so stressed out." Well, that's the beauty of this, right? Is that when they put it on in their hand, they'll also have a smart device, right? And on that device, they will see their breath rate. And so when they're standing there right before me and they're telling me, they don't like it, it's making them uncomfortable, I'm going to say, look at your breath. Now, is it the strap, or is it because you're breathing differently because you're uncomfortable? So I'm be like, okay, well, why don't you push this button and do like a little bit of a guided breathing session where you'll see the intended breath that you're supposed to take alongside your actual, right? So you've got kind of like this ghost waveform, and and they'll see their breath while they're uncomfortable, and their breath is going to be very disrupted, right? Like they're uncomfortable, they're breathing shallowly, it's getting worse, their heart rate's increasing, and they're about to just rip this thing off and throw it on the ground because they're done. Well, and like that's the magic, right? Is that before their vitals start to escalate and things just spiral out of control, the intervention, right? The breathing intervention comes into play and helps them slow things down. And so when they start to slow things down, then what happens? Well, what I think will happen is they'll relax, right? They'll be like, okay, you know what? Maybe this isn't as uncomfortable as I thought. Maybe I'll give this a chance, right? And so then from there, it just gets better. So from there, as I was doing this, as I was, rapid prototyping with my 3D printer, I got to a point where I had like 15 pieces right in front of me, right? And I just had them in a row. I started on the left and I just piecemealed them, like added one each time. And I was like, man, this is dangerous because I know where I started, but what if like something were to happen? What if I bumped my desk and like they fell over and everything got mixed up? Well, then I kind of was like, okay, well, I'm gonna have to create some sort of inventory control system so that I can keep detailed track of all of my prototype parts and I'm not, iterating on something that I already iterated on, etc. And so that's what this is here. And I was excited about this. I was like, man, I'm gonna have like two or three of these things filled up. They're gonna be, framed and mounted on my walls because I'm so proud of all the work I did. And then I finished here. So it happened much faster than I thought. And I still, I looked into research, or I researched what it would cost to hire like a firm or like some sort of design agency to do this prototyping for me, and it would have cost tens of thousands of dollars. And I did this for a fraction of that. All it cost me was my own time. Now, fortunately, I didn't have a job, so I have nothing but time, which is cool. But you know, run rate, right, or runway, and that brings us to where we are today, right? So as I've been mentioning, Breathaware is going to have an application that pairs with it, right? And I do not have a coding or I just don't have a coding background, right? I mean, I worked as an analyst for quite some time, and that was kind of always my mindset, very analytical. And I'm familiar with uh, like SQL. I did a lot of work with Microsoft Access while I was actually an analyst. I did a lot. I've done a lot of work with Excel and uh, what's their is it Visual? No, it's not Visual Studio. Anyway, but I mean I know enough to be dangerous, but I couldn't go. I've never actually written my own program other than Hello World, if that makes sense. So how am I going to make an app, right? Like what the hell? Like how am I going to do that? Well, introducing this is where I introduce AI, right? Or large language models, LLMs. They can actually write code for you. So everyone's used to the familiar chat interface that is on, ChatGPT or Claude Code or Google Gemini. But did you know that you can also like just like you would talk to it or communicate with it, send messages for it to process and then return a message? You can also do that with coding. So you can request a program, it would write it for you. You can copy it, save it as a file, and then run it. And in fact, some ways you can even integrate it in a way that it will create the file automatically, run it automatically, and do the whole process essentially. So what you'll hear a lot about, or what you do hear a lot about, and it gets kind of a bad rap, but it's vibe coding, and it is definitely a vibe. And I would recommend it. Like you should try it because it's fun. It's amazing to see you type a message and it goes to work, right? You just see the characters appearing, the words, and it's like you just kind of it goes slow enough to where you can kind of read it, and as you're reading it you're learning, right? Which is cool. So what I would do is, and this is right around this June time frame, so let me explain this down here. Excuse me. So in GitHub, which is what this is a screenshot of, is my activity in GitHub. So think of GitHub as like a place where you can store a coding project, and it can be accessed by many people, like a team, and you can check segments of code out, edit them, and then check them back in, and et cetera. And your project lives online in this application. It's a good tool, but when I was unfamiliar with it, it was a little bit intimidating. So we're not going to focus too much on GitHub. This is just to show my activity there. So you can see 1,441 contributions, but keep in mind, like I said, that a lot of those are these like Codex CLI, which is ChatGPT's tool or OpenAI's tool for pair programmer, and then Claude Code as well. So up here, this is the vibe code box, right? So I've got a window for Claude open and a window for ChatGPT, and I'm here's my coding terminals, right? So in each of these little lanes is a session where I'm communicating in this text box with this program writing or code writing version of ChatGPT, right? And so when I don't know the answer, I'm sending it to Claude Code and ChatGPT also. So I'm in the loop, but I'm just translating from one to another. And same thing over here. Down here, you can see an earlier version of the prototype for Breathaware, and so interesting story here. So when I was first working on it, I didn't need to be on my body. It just needed to be on my desk, and I needed a way to pull the string to make sure that the sensor was sending. And so this was like an iteration where that's what I did this with, right? That test. And so I still remember I took this device up and I placed it on my chest, right on the front of my chest. And I remember looking down and thinking, there is no way anyone is going to wear this thing on their chest. And right then and there, I'd been launching a startup's not easy, and you got to know when to quit, right? You got to know when to hold them, and you got to know when to fold them. And at this very moment, I was like, I'm gonna have to find a new job. And I mean, the floor fell out beneath me, and I was like, man, this sucks. And I was like, but I would, that's the initial response or the initial reaction. But I'm not a quitter. I don't give up. And so I was like, okay, you know what? Let's reimagine this. How can I do this? And so that's where I began. I wasn't really sure where to start, right? I didn't know if I should design the housing for the components or if I should design the housing around the components. And so that's what I ended up doing, was designing it around the components. And then last but not least, um, so again, to tie back to my earlier message, when I first began my journey into I mean, even now, I've kind of developed some, I don't know, like some scar tissue for it, but you will be there is an overwhelming amount of information out there, and it's all new all the time. I mean, the field is just on fire. When I was working with these tools back in June, if I were to compare them to how they are now, it is a vastly different experience. I mean, it's far superior to than how it was back in June. Like, not even kidding. And it came out sometime. Codex CLI came out somewhere in this time frame. Um, I believe. If that's not correct, let me know down in the comments. But my all that is to say that it's only going to get better, right? Well, um, but and like that's the craziest thing, right? Is that it's going to continue to be like this. The environment is just go go go, excitement excitement excitement, as fast as you can all the time, right? I don't, and that's not what we're going to do here. Um, so what I found in my journey of doing this, of being overwhelmed, right, was what is the source? Like, where are these people getting their sources of information? And not like, just if I just follow the trail, eventually I will go to this. I'll find the source of who created this information, and maybe they will have some content that I can learn from, right? So that's how, when I stumbled upon machine learning yearning, or Andrew and G. Andrew, if you ever listen to this video and I say your name wrong, I apologize. But uh, so my understanding of it is that Google has a brain lab, or it's named something similar to that. And Andrew Ng, he was basically one of the co-founders of this lab at Google, right? So he didn't. There's a groundbreaking paper that led to all of this, agency for AIs, I believe, called oh shit, I can't even remember. I think it's like memory is all you need, or focus is all you need, or concentration is all you need. I better look this up right now. This would be a huge disservice to them. Attention, man. It's like a No, attention is all you need. So this paper was co-authored by authors at Google's Brain Lab, right? That was founded by Andrew Ng, or co-founded by Andrew Ng. And so he, you know, helped usher in the next generation of AI engineers. So that if I were to recommend a resource to anybody, it would just look up his work, and you will find a plethora of well-paced materials to learn about AI from. And then last but not least, how this whole journey with open AI, or with open source models, which is what we're going to be using, really began, and that's with Apple. Okay, so when I began my journey of coding, I would typically go to ChatGPT. Actually, during my modeling for my 3D modeling, I would use ChatGPT to like ask for questions on for like tips and how tos for FreeCAD. So FreeCAD is an open source 3D modeling tool, and it's not perfect, right? It's open source. Not that's nothing that doesn't take anything away from it being open source, but there's just a lot of documentation out there, a lot of different versions of the software, and it's open source, which means it's not professionally, it's not supported financially full time. It's kind of like something that people do as a hobby, or maybe there's some people that get sponsored, but documentation is not the priority. And so I would do the same thing whenever I would set up a development environment, right? I would consult ChatGPT to set up my programming environment on my Windows PC. Well, then I found that a lot of tools that sounded like were geared more towards Linux. So I was like, okay, well, I'll buy a Linux. I'll buy a PC and I'll use Linux on it, right? I'll dual boot. I'll dual boot to Linux. And so I did that, and then I was working with a tool called Figma, which is like a design software that you can like program diagrammatically, to where my my plan was to have ChatGPT or Claude Code and Codex CLI. Each time there was a file that they created in the program, they would create a node in Figma, and then the relationships between the nodes would be like a visual representation of the program. And when you download the application, there's a native MCP server, which I'm going too deep into the technical details, but basically it didn't work with Linux. So I had to switch. And then everything was like optimized for Apple. So I was like, okay. So I went to the Apple store, and I started talking to one of the guys that works there, telling him about what I'm doing with AI or what I want to. And he's like, oh yeah, hey, yeah, my buddy, he's got this. He has like a website that he put out there for me, his friends to use. And he showed it to me, and he's like, yeah, there's a you just type in text like you would and talk to it. And I was like, why would you? First of all, how is this even possible? And I was like, is he just using ChatGPT, or is he using like Claude Code, to stand up his own? He's just like routing the service to his own website. And I was like, oh, that's weird. Like, why? And so I went home, and first thing I did was I got on my brand new Mac. I was like, okay, we're setting up a new development environment here. So I need to install, I need to like talk to ChatGPT. Hey, what's up? What's the plan? Have that on one thing, and then I'm working on a Mac computer. So I started the first instruction with the Mac, you know, fine, whatever. And I'm like, I just know I'm gonna have to do this like 10 times, because it never works the first time, because based on my experience with FreeCAD, like it's referring to documentation that's from like a previous version. And so that option in the menu it wants me to click on doesn't exist anymore. And so I have that same expectation for this guide with Mac, right? Well, I go step by step, every single step. I do the entire thing, one go. And I was like, seriously, my mind was blown. I was like, how is this possible? Because, think about it. How much time have I wasted so far troubleshooting issues that are handed to me by ChatGPT? I mean, there was many days where I had to just walk away from my computer because I just could not make progress, and it was so frustrating. And here I am on a Mac for the first time, one-shotting this list of instructions. I mean, it was just another surreal experience. And so that's when I really realized why Apple is superior from my perspective for developers, because with Windows, there's so many different hardware configurations, right? I mean, there's so many options for a processor, a motherboard, memory. All of these things have to be accounted for when you're developing in Windows, right? Or for Windows. But with Mac, there's a very limited number of hardware configurations, because Apple controls the hardware and the operating system, which means that when you go out and you try to find a guide on how to do something in Apple, chances are it's going to work for you because it was written for your specific setup because there's such a narrow list of setups available. Completely blew my mind open and introduced me for the first time to large language models, uh, local open source large language models. So here, uh, talk a little bit about my invention here. I think I already talked about this, how I iterated on all the different devices. I skipped it backwards. Okay, so 30 minutes in, man, what a long video. So anyway, my villain origin story really just relates to the API fees. So I spent about $1,400 using Google Gemini's API fee, like just testing, right? I wouldn't say I paid for anything usable. I paid for experience, and I got a significant return on that experience, on that payment for experience in the form of experience. Next one, OpenAI, I spent about $1,800. Uh, what does that bring us to? About $3,000, $3,200 so far, and then about $100 with Claude Code. And the reason for that is just the way that Claude Code's API, subscription fee model works, is where you're basically allowed to use their API, or not their API, I'm sorry, but their CLI tool. So, and then I left a slide in here, right? And this is like my third time recording this presentation. First time, I was like, I'm just gonna deadpan it, right? It's gonna be a joke slide. Second time, I was like, okay, I'm gonna use this slide as a template, and in future presentations, I'm going to ask a local model for a quote, right, on open source models or something. Here I am, my third time recording this video because I've just had technical issues the whole time. You know what? That's all I'm saying for this one this time. All right, and then not in the header here, but losing sight of the shore, right? So how do you lose sight of the shore? Or that's the quote I should have used. Let me look this up too. And if you've made it 30 minutes, you can make it a couple more. But I appreciate you waiting. Okay, so you cannot swim for new horizons until you have the courage to lose sight of the shore. And so that's what I'm doing here, right? I'm losing sight of the shore. That is these subscription-based LLMs. So I canceled this, I think it was on Wednesday. And obviously, here I am recording the video again on Friday. And then I also canceled ChatGPT. So I still have access for about a month, but I can't keep running to mom and dad every time I have a problem. I've got to become self-reliant. I've got to find a way to make these local LLM models perform similar, if not better than what's publicly available. And then lastly, if you're familiar with tech, like I said, this is my second time recording this video today, my third one overall. If I haven't mentioned it already, a tech stack is basically all of the tools in a stack that help you manage your project, right? And so for our stack, remember I said I wanted to keep our focus very narrow, right? We want to slow things down. We want to take it easy. We're going to try to learn, right? We're not trying to compress a bunch of information in. We're trying to organically let it flow into our minds and give ourselves some time to think around them. So our two tools are LM Studio and Langflow. So LM Studio is, think of it as like a marketplace where you can download open source models completely free, open source. They're released by big corporations like Meta. I think I've already mentioned this. Meta, Google, OpenAI, DeepSeek, Quinn. Like all of these models are phenomenal, seriously. And what's amazing about them is that you can run them on your own computer. And then Langflow is a visual builder, right? So it gives us several pieces in the forms of components that we can connect to one another that will give us the same functionality as ChatGPT, right? So LM Studio does the same. ChatGPT has a chat interface, right? So you've got a text box you can enter into, right? We'll call that an input. It's got, you send the message, so then you send it to ChatGPT. It processes the message, and then it sends it back, right? And then when you receive that message back, it's essentially an output from ChatGPT, right? So you've got a, hope you like my hand gestures here, a input component connected to a large language model, an LLM, and you've got an LLM that's connected to your output. And you don't see those things behind the scenes. You only see the text, like the scrolling text. But Langflow allows you to assemble those components together to build, what is at its most basic form a chatbot, right? A basic input output. With those tools, you can build essentially anything, and you could build something that works, that like works indefinitely. So we're gonna explore those things in the next video. So thanks for being here. Hopefully this video, there's no issues with the quality of it, but feel free to leave some comments for me in the comments. Looking for feedback. If 35 minutes, is this too long? Let me know. I'll see if I can cut it back. We'll see you in the next one.